In the stillness of the night beneath an indifferent sky, truths lurk in the shadows of our understanding. Stories that, once heard, reconfigure the very tapestry of reality. Today, we delve into one such narrative, that of an ordinary man whose life was irrevocably transformed by encounters that defy logic, encounters that snatched him from an ordinary existence and thrust him into the epicenter of a cosmic mystery. Prepare to learn about the accounts of Chris Bledsoe, a journey that took him from hunting in the forests of North Carolina to the far reaches of space, and back again, with a burden and a cure that would echo throughout the world. What did he see? Who were these creatures? And what message did they bring from the stars? The answers may be closer and more unsettling than we imagine. Before anomalous lights tore through the sky of his life, Chris Bledsoe was a name etched in American tradition. Born into a conventional family, his childhood was marked by an event that, in retrospect, seems like a dark premonition of the extraordinary to come. At 10 years old, the innocence of youth was shattered by the blast of a gunshot. He was hunting with a friend, deep in the verdant expanse, when chance, or perhaps a preordained destiny, placed him in the line of fire. Struck in the shoulder, life briefly ebbed away. An out-of-body experience, teeny, he, respectful in Bengali, not needed here, just noting internal thought for word choice, reported as urgency rushed him to the hospital. A farmer, an anonymous angel, had heard the cries, years dragged on in slow recovery. At 20, another burden. Crohn's disease, a chronic and relentless inflammation of the intestine, sentencing him to a daily existence with pain. He sought solace in faith, rising to the position of deacon in the Pentecostal Holiness Church. Adult life brought love and loss. His first wife, taken by a car accident. Years later, a new home with Yvonne, and the joy of raising 4 children. Professionally, Chris was the 3rd generation in a line of builders. His company, a behemoth in North Carolina, erected dreams and amassed millions. A commercial pilot in his spare time, a passion tempered by the fear of orphaning his young ones. In the year 2000, Chris saw himself at the pinnacle. A beloved family, a flourishing business, his illness under control. He resided in a beautiful home in Fayetteville, North Carolina, a city known for its military base, Fort Bragg, but also for its idyllic rural areas where luxury met tranquility. Fayetteville, a microcosm of America, with its 208,000 inhabitants, was the setting for a life that seemed shielded from misfortune. But fate, like a capricious screenwriter, was preparing a monumental twist. The echoes of the September 11th, 2001, attacks resonated profoundly in Chris's life. The real estate market, once a river of prosperity, had dried up. His company, formerly an empire, began to crumble. In a single year, $18 million vanished like smoke. By 2005, the specter of bankruptcy was a constant shadow. The family business, a legacy passed down through generations, was sold. Chris, the magnate, became a freelancer, scrambling to make ends meet. The stress gnawed at his health, exacerbating his Crohn's disease. But the wheel of fortune, ever fickle, turned once more in 2006. The American economy was showing signs of recovery. In December, a significant real estate sale brought a whisper of hope, and then, January 8, 2007, arrived. His eldest son, Christopher Jr., affectionately known as Junior, then 16 years old, convinced his 46-year-old father, Chris, to celebrate this small victory with a fishing trip, a much-needed reprieve. They set off in a pickup truck, Chris, Jr., and 3 more friends, heading for the Cape Fear River, or roughly 6 miles from their home. It was a secluded spot, a natural sanctuary enveloped by dense forest and sprawling cornfields. They parked and made their way down a trail to the river's serene banks. It was about 3 in the afternoon. 3 p.m. lines were cast. the patient vigil of fishermen underway, but Chris's soul was restless. Despite the sail, the weight of recent failures, the shame of no longer providing as he once had, the illness that served as a constant reminder of his fragility, all of it propelled him on a solitary walk. He ventured into the woods, the sky his only witness to a silent prayer, a desperate plea for divine help. In North Carolina, January means the sun begins its descent around 5:30 in the evening, 5:30 p.m. Chris remained in a clearing, meditating, until nearly 4:45, around 4:45 p.m. He then rejoined the group. The decision was made. They would spend the night there fishing. Chris took on the task of building a bonfire, a barrier against wild animals, a beacon of light and warmth, a focal point for preparing their food. With the fire crackling, he announced to his friends that he was going to hike to the top of a nearby hill. He yearned to gaze at the night sky, to continue his prayers in solitude. As he ascended the trail, an unsettling sensation began to creep over him. Footsteps, a rhythm that mirrored his own. When he stopped, the sound stopped. When he resumed walking, the footsteps echoed behind him. Someone was following him. He scanned his surroundings several times. Nothing. The forest, a place he'd known since he was 6 years old from hunting trips with his father, had never instilled fear in him. But now an inexplicable tension gripped him. He pressed on, and then something nestled among the tree branches seized his attention. At first, he dismissed it as the sun, but as he drew closer, the glow intensified and, strangely, it began to rise. The sun should have been setting, not ascending. He stopped. He watched. An orange-red sphere, as brilliant as the sun itself, yet, curiously, it didn't sting his eyes. He tried to ignore it, to push forward. But when he glanced skyward again, astonishment struck him. Now, there were 2 spheres, 2 suns, hovering above the tree line, spinning in place, spitting out small trails of fire in all directions. Fear hit him like a physical blow. He ducked, scrambling for cover, his mind desperately trying to process the impossible. This was dangerous. He had to get back, to warn his son, his friends. He took a few hesitant steps, but curiosity, that primal, irresistible force, urged him on. He looked back, needing to confirm what his eyes were struggling to believe. And it was in that precise moment that a third object, similar to the others, materialized, floating just a few feet above him. An icy shiver traced its way down his spine. Panic surged. He tried to move, to scream, to run, but his body refused to obey. His muscles were frozen, as if invisible talons had him in their grasp. In the blink of an eye, everything went dark. His next memory, he was lying on the ground, a few yards from the bonfire he had built. He saw his 3 friends walking along the riverbank. He staggered to his feet and went to them. The relief on their faces was palpable. "Chris, where were you? We've been looking all over for you," he replied, disoriented, that he'd been on the trail to the hill, gone for no more than 20 minutes. Their response sent a shockwave through him. "Chris, you were gone for over 4 hours." The night had already fallen, thick and heavy. They had searched the trail, the hilltop. He was nowhere to be found. His son, Junior, had refused to give up and was still out there in the forest, alone, searching for his father. Fear for Junior's safety spurred him into action. Chris ran, shouting Junior's name, in the direction his friends had last seen his son. And here, the narrative splits, enriched by Junior's own chilling testimony. While searching for his father, Junior too had spotted the 2 orange-red spheres drifting between the trees. His friends, terrified, had bolted back towards the safety of the campfire. But Junior, driven by a mix of concern and an unshakable curiosity, had remained. And then, directly in front of him, two creatures appeared. They were small, humanoid and slender, with large, disproportionate heads, enormous reddish eyes, and long, thin fingers. The spheres cast an eerie, phantasmal light on the scene, revealing their shadowy forms. The creatures simply stared at Junior, and he found himself paralyzed, a silent, suffocating terror gripping his being. After a moment, they began to search the ground, as if looking for something specific. The trance was only broken by the distant sound of Chris calling his name. Junior scrambled towards his father, sobbing, babbling about the terrifying creatures in the woods. Father and son, reunited with their friends by the fire, almost simultaneously began to describe the luminous spheres. But before they could exchange more than a few frantic words, a new disturbance in the night sky silenced them all. Approximately 8 spheres, identical to the ones they'd already seen, darted across the darkness in erratic, zigzag patterns. Within seconds, 3 of them shot down, stopping abruptly to hover directly in front of the group, just above the riverbank. Absolute panic ensued. They abandoned everything: tents, fishing rods, food. They sprinted, desperate, towards the pickup truck. The escape. Just a short distance down the dirt road, another terrifying blockade. An immense, reddish-orange object, this time oval and elongated, like a giant glowing pill capsule or a tic-tac. It was between 10 to 15 meters, roughly 33 to 49 feet, in length. It made no sound. It floated about 2 meters or approximately 6.5 feet above the ground. Beside it, 2 smaller, brilliant spheres pulsed with light. Chris, behind the wheel, slammed on the brakes. The terror inside the truck was a palpable entity. Tears flowed, sobs racked their bodies. They were utterly incapable of comprehending or reacting. They noticed the lights of a nearby farmhouse, a flicker of hope. Since the object was blocking their path, they decided to seek help there. The house lights were on, a TV screen glowed through the window, signs of life. But no one answered their frantic knocks or calls. Defeated, they returned to the truck. As they looked back at the road, the objects had ascended, clearing the way. But the respite was short-lived. In a matter of seconds, the larger, elongated object was directly over their pickup, so close they felt they could almost reach out and touch it. Then, with breathtaking speed, it shot northward, disappearing into the inky blackness. Chris drove as fast as he could, adrenaline still pulsing through his veins, dropping each friend off at their respective homes. Lastly, he and Junior headed to theirs. They arrived around midnight. Junior, still in shock, turned on every light in the house. Yvonne, Chris's wife and Junior's mother, and the younger children were traveling that night. The house felt strangely empty, echoing the terror they had experienced. Before they could even begin to process the events of that surreal night, a new alarm sounded. The dogs in the kennel behind the house were barking with a frantic intensity, a guttural warning that something or someone had trespassed onto the property. Chris's house was on his father's land, bordering a dense wooded area. Knowing his father was alone in the neighboring house, Chris felt he had to investigate, despite the fear that still gripped him. Junior, understandably, refused to accompany him into the darkness of the forest. Chris advanced cautiously, one of his dogs beside him, sniffing out the unknown. A few meters into the woods, and there it was. The creature. The same characteristics Junior had described hours earlier, now visible to Chris's eyes. A mere 4 meters, about 13 feet away. Small, its head disproportionately large, red and piercing eyes, a slender body. This time, Chris noticed a crucial detail. The creature wore a tight-fitting suit, a single piece covering almost its entire body. In the center of its chest, a triangle emitted a soft orange glow. Fear gave way to a strange resignation. I have nothing left to do here. I surrender, Chris thought, certain that any resistance would be futile. And in that exact instant, a voice resonated in his mind. Strong, clear, unequivocal, though no physical sound had been uttered. "We are not here to hurt you, but to help." The dog, instinctively protective, lunged at the creature. But in the blink of an eye, the being simply vanished. It faded into the air before Chris's astonished eyes. The dog lunged past, barking at the empty space. Chris returned home, his heart still pounding in his chest, and told Junior what he had seen and heard. That night, something changed within him, a subtle yet profound transformation. In the days that followed, compelled by an inexplicable instinct, he stopped taking his medication for Crohn's disease. The pain, his constant companions for years, disappeared. He no longer needed restrictive diets. His health, previously a source of chronic concern, seemed restored. And this was the first, and perhaps the most personal, of the miracles Chris would attribute to those creatures of the night. Every time Chris tried to access the memories of those 4 lost hours in the forest, a barrier arose. Sudden blackouts, overwhelming night terrors that tore him from sleep, screaming, drenched in cold sweat. The story of the sightings, however, could not be contained. Like wildfire, it spread through the community. Chris, with the conviction of those touched by the inexplicable, told of his healing, attributing it to those enigmatic entities. It wasn't long before his case attracted the attention of investigators. Medical exams confirmed the impossible. Crohn's disease had vanished without a trace. To unravel the mystery of the lost time, Chris agreed to undergo regressive hypnosis. 14 months had passed since the fateful night on the Cape Fear River. The session, conducted by Dr. Michael O'Connell, a psychiatrist associated with Harvard University, was meticulously videotaped. Fragments of this recording, like whispers from another world, can still be found in the vastness of the internet. Under hypnosis, the submerged memories emerged. Chris recalled walking the trail, the luminous sphere hovering above him. Then, the capture. A dark place, followed by a light switching on, revealing 3 figures that seemed human, though their details remained hazy. And then, the tour. Chris, enveloped in a transparent cocoon, a protective bubble, was taken beyond Earth. He saw the blue circumference of the planet, the starry vastness of the cosmos, the sensation of floating, free from gravity. Then, a journey through different parts of the globe, lush forests, majestic mountains, and a passage by the pyramids of Egypt, where he felt a strange and powerful energy. The testimonies of Chris's friends, Donnie Eckerman, Jenny Robinson, and David McDonald and his son Junior, were collected separately. The narratives, surprisingly, converged on all crucial points, lending solid credibility to the case. However, a polygraph test cast a shadow of doubt. Chris failed. For many, it was proof that his story was an elaborate fabrication. The investigation, turned into a television documentary instead of bringing answers, deepened Chris's ordeal. The doubt sown by the polygraph blossomed into rejection. The community, once his home, turned its back on him. His children became outcasts at school, targets of ridicule, isolated. His wife, Yvonne, began to doubt. The relationship frayed, silence and distrust settling into their home. In local churches, whispers turned into accusations. Chris had made a pact with the devil, cursed his family. Even his own father, previously a pillar of support, suggested his son was under the influence of narcotics. Madness seemed to be the only acceptable explanation for the inexplicable. Child Protective Services even intervened, threatening to remove custody of his children. But the darkness would not last forever. Chris's family, Yvonne, and the other children began to witness the inexplicable with their own eyes. Luminous orbs frequently danced on the property, sometimes dozens of them, flying around the yard, at times passing through the walls of the house as if they were made of air. Yvonne acquired a camera, recording the appearances. These shared experiences were the cement that reunited the family. Belief in Chris and Junior's story was restored, and together they began to defend the truth they had experienced, even if that truth branded them as different. As strangers in their own community, for a Christian family, confronting the idea of aliens was a theological and existential challenge. 5 years passed under the weight of ostracism. Their financial situation, which had barely recovered from the first blow, worsened again. Then came April 8th, 2012, an Easter Sunday. But for Chris Bledsoe, there was no resurrection, only the despair of a life in ruins. Around 9:30 at night, he left home, walking alone through a desolate field. The idea of an end, a full stop to the suffering, to the shame, to the burden he believed he had imposed on his family, was taking shape in his mind. Perhaps without him, his family could start over, free from the stigma. He looked to the sky and screamed his anguish, accusing the creatures who had healed him of, paradoxically, having destroyed his life. He reached a set of train tracks, the abyss of self-destruction before him. But courage, or perhaps an invisible intervention, failed him. He turned back, returned home, lay down, and fell into an exhausted sleep. In the early hours of the morning, around 3 a.m., a voice awakened him, strong, imperious. "Get up!" It was the same voice he had heard years before in the forest, near the triangular-chested creature. He looked around and saw the shadows of the humanoids. A chilling understanding washed over him. They had complete control. They could compel him to do anything. With no command over his own body, he rose and followed the silhouettes that guided him out the back door, towards an open field. There, the creatures handed him an object. Its exact nature remains a mystery in the accounts. And then they disappeared. Before Chris could react, a gust of wind struck him with force, throwing him backward. And then he saw it. A quadrupedal figure, made of pure light, advancing and passing over him. As he tried to get back on his feet, the most stunning spectacle of the night revealed itself. Less than 2 meters, about 6.5 feet from him, a woman of ethereal beauty. She floated inches off the ground, cloaked in a white gown that flowed from her neck to her bare feet. Her appearance was human, but she radiated a bluish-white light that bathed everything around her in a 5-meter, about 16-foot radius. She approached and spoke. She said this was his burden, a burden he must carry, and his duty was to tell his story to the world. She promised help, her constant presence, and that, from that moment on, their experience would be shared with others. There, in that field illuminated by her aura, the woman revealed her identity, or rather, her essence. She was the divine feminine, the manifestation of a universal force, pre-existing creation, worshipped by ancient peoples as a goddess, as Hathor, the Egyptian deity of love, joy, and music. And then came the warning. A dark force, the great deception, was conspiring for the end of times. The apocalypse. This malevolent race sought to manifest cataclysms to annihilate humanity. If Chris did not disseminate the message, the warning, he would be co-responsible for the loss of innocent lives when the suffering began. The trigger, she said, would be a great cosmic alignment, the red star, known as Rulos, with the gaze of the Sphinx on Earth. The approximate date, Easter 2026. After that, chaos would reign, but also new knowledge would emerge for the peoples of the world. Other prophecies about natural disasters and cataclysmic events were transmitted, but their details remain veiled in the available sources. Months later, Chris Bledsoe, now a bearer of a cosmic message, drafted letters detailing this encounter, the prophecies of the woman he called Delir, and sent them to the Pentagon. The response, if any, was never made public. The extraordinary phenomena in Chris's life did not cease. In early 2013, while an investigator was filming his testimony, one of his dogs appeared with a severe neck wound. Chris tried to stanch the bleeding, but the animal did not survive. And then, before the cameras, according to reports, Chris placed his hand on the wound. The gash closed. The dog stood up as if nothing had happened. Parts of this alleged video recording were reportedly released, further fueling the aura of mystery around him. On July 3rd of the same year, a call from the government. A child in Washington, Brandon, 10 years old, needed his visit. Brandon suffered from a rare genetic mitochondrial problem, dependent on tube feeding, given no hope by doctors with a life expectancy of only 1 more year. Through the Make-A-Wish program, his last wish was for everything to be done to cure him. After medical attempts failed, Brandon's parents, having heard Chris's story, sought his help. Chris spoke with Brandon for over an hour, sharing his experiences, offering words of hope. He reported having concentrated intensely, seeking to tune his mind with the lady, the entity of light, and prayed for the boy's healing. Later, the call from Brandon's parents. The boy had improved, was eating on his own. Brandon recovered completely. Years later, in an interview as an adult, over 20 years old, attending college, he would confirm his full health, a living testament to the inexplicable. Chris Bledsoe's story transcended the borders of his small community. The CIA, NASA, UFO, researchers from various countries like England and Australia, and even the Vatican, investigated his experiences. There are records of government agents witnessing the flying orbs during investigations on Chris's property. For years, he was studied, analyzed by hundreds of investigators, skeptics, and believers. And, despite everything, his case has never been conclusively debunked. Prominent figures like former senior CIA intelligence officer Gene Sammartino and retired Army Colonel John B. Alexander thoroughly investigated his claims and publicly supported the authenticity of his encounters, contributing to his book. Chris believes the lady is a superior, perhaps divine, entity, and that the events predicted for 2026 may mark the beginning of broader contact with these beings. He draws parallels with Marian apparitions, such as the miracle of the sun in Fatima, Portugal in 1917, and points to the symbolism of pyramids and triangles in governmental insignia as evidence of a deeper connection. His book, UFO of God, The Extraordinary True Story of Chris Bledsoe, details his journey, although he admits certain details were omitted to avoid interfering with future events. What was revealed to him he claims to have shared with the authorities. What they did with that information remains a mystery. The saga of Chris Bledsoe is a labyrinth where ufology, spirituality, and the paranormal intertwine in a unique and bewildering way. An ordinary man torn from his reality and confronted with phenomena that challenge our understanding of the universe and our own place within it. From the inexplicable healing of Crohn's disease to encounters with beings from other worlds and an entity of light-bearing prophecies, his story forces us to question the limits of the possible. Could these encounters be glimpses of a greater reality? An interaction with intelligences that observe us and, at times, intervene in ways we can barely begin to comprehend? Or are they complex manifestations of a psyche confronted with the extreme? The truth, as so often in the mysteries of ufology, remains elusive, inviting speculation and debate. What do you think of Chris Bledsoe's incredible journey? Were you already familiar with the details of this complex case? Is there any aspect we left out that you consider crucial? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective enriches our search for answers. And if this exploration of the unknown resonated with you, don't forget to leave a like. It's a simple, free gesture, but it helps us immensely to continue bringing these fascinating stories to you, allowing YouTube to recommend our work to more enthusiasts of this intriguing universe. Together, we continue to look to the sky, seeking to understand the enigmas it holds.